Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library Museum. My name is Joe Lopez. I have the honor of serving as acting president and CEO of the Richard Nixon Foundation. We've got a big morning here ahead of us, so let's get right into it. We are fortunate to here today to not only have the son of a president, but the grandson of a president as well. This is a rare occasion to see a Nixon and a Trump on stage together. So please join me in welcoming Eric Trump and Christopher Nixon Cox to the East Room. Please remain standing as we take a moment to honor the country that we all love.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and the bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you to the Troy High School Navy JROTC and Tim Kepler for helping us honor our country this morning. We've got a great discussion here lined up for you all in just a moment, but before we get started, I want to make a special announcement on behalf of the Richard Nixon Foundation. We're honored today to have two longtime friends and supporters with us Sean and Leland Smith here today. Sean and Leland have been a part of the Nixon Library family for 35 years. They go back attending events with President Nixon in the early days. They have a beautiful family that they've raised here in Yorba Linda. They've built a great, successful business in Service Champions. And 2 years ago, the Richard Nixon Foundation launched the American Civics campaign. And this is an effort to help young Americans understand their history, their government, the Constitution, their founding, so that they realized how lucky and fortunate they are to grow up in the greatest country on earth. And Sean and Leland have gotten behind that effort. And they have made an incredible commitment to the Nixon Foundation and the American Civics campaign in the amount of $1 million. So thank you so much. And because of this extraordinary gift, and because Leland and Sean Smith enjoy our speaker series so much, starting today, we have renamed, or have now named, our speaker series the Sean and Leland Smith Distinguished Speaker Series. So what a way to kick that off with this event here today. We look forward to many more events in the Sean and Leland Smith Distinguished Speaker Series. Now on to our discussion here. Our moderator this morning is Christopher Nixon Cox, grandson of President and Mrs. Nixon. He's a member of our board here at the Nixon Foundation, does a lot for the library, and does a lot to help carry on the legacy of his grandparents. And joining him is the #1 author in the country right now. Eric has told me that Amazon has just run out of books. He is #1 right now. And I know you all have a copy of the book with you, and he looks forward to meeting you all and signing those books later on today. But Eric Trump, you all know him. He's the executive vice president of the Trump Organization. He's been with his father and his family every step of the way in leading our country, and we're so pleased and honored to have him with us here today. So please, Chris and Eric, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, and thank you to everyone in the extended Nixon family for being here this morning. It's really an honor for me to be here with Eric, for several reasons, but the Trump family and the Nixon family go back so far. My mom did her first real estate deal in New York with Eric's dad when my grandparents were moving back to New York from California. Eric's dad, Donald Trump, said, well, we'd really love to have the Nixons live in one of our properties in New York. And so he called my mom and they negotiated a real estate deal. Unfortunately, my grandmother didn't like heights, and all the Trump buildings are really tall. So she preferred a townhouse, so she went with the townhouse. But she loved the Trump properties. We've had a great friendship with the Trump family ever since. And so this is my first time moderating something here at the Nixon Foundation. But one of the last times I was on stage was with Charlie Kirk 5 years ago when he spoke to the Nixon Foundation. So, that was, of course, an amazing moment. He was an amazing person. And I've always remembered that day, and of course, with the events of the last few weeks, the tragedy. It's, so glad that I had a chance to meet him, and he touched so many lives. And so it's just, he's an amazing person. So that was one of my last memories of being up here on stage. So, Eric, maybe big shoes to fill, but I know you can fill them. So.
And Charlie was a great friend. And by the way, I can't tell you how much Charlie would love the fact that we're here in California, often referred to as the People's Republic, unfortunately, and we're going to change that, okay? Fighting for great conservative causes with a great group of conservatives at an unbelievable library. And guys, it's truly an honor. It's truly, truly an honor.
So I got a chance to read Under Siege on the flight coming out to California from New York. And what really struck me was your description of your father. It was just so emotional and just a wonderful description of the man. And you said that, I'm going to quote, you said, many people come up to you and say, tell me about your dad. And you're like, well, I mean, he's my dad. It's like hard to describe my dad, right? And I said, well, try being the grandson of Richard Nixon and getting that question. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about your dad. That was such a beautiful description you had in your book. I'd love for the audience to hear that.
Guys, I never thought I was going to be an author. In fact, it's the last thing I had in my mind. I'm a builder. I love construction. I love concrete. I love HVAC, right? It's kind of what we do. It's what I've always done. And honestly, I lived through this fight, right, where I'll never forget when my father called us up to his office. He goes, I'm going to run for president, kids. I'm going to run. Let's do this. Everything we had ever done, we had done together, right? We had done together as a family. Whether it was real estate, it was the hotels, it was the golf courses, it was the apprentice. We'd always done it. And all of a sudden, we were entering this new world. We didn't know a damn thing about politics. I mean, guys, we knew, like, nothing. I always joke, I didn't know what a delegate was. You certainly didn't know what the Iowa caucuses were. And don't laugh at me saying that because you don't know what the damn Iowa caucuses are either, all right? And yet, I'll never forget, we came down that escalator the first time, and that's really when kind of the siege started. That's why I called it Under Siege, right? And he said to us in the office that day, he goes, kids, they're going to come after us in ways that you could never possibly imagine. We're going to learn who our true friends are. And by the way, this family has been true friends, including his father, who I've known. I spent every day on the phone with his father during the 2016 campaign as he was battling. And this is a tough task. Your dad's been sitting there battling for the heart and soul of Republicans in New York for a very long time. And, an amazing guy. But never did I think that they were going to do to us. And I've seen this level. I've seen so many different aspects of my father's personality, whether it's kind of growing up with him, the discipline of a father who was fundamentally against drugs, fundamentally against drinking, fundamentally against, smoking. You better get good grades. You better work. A guy who was putting us on construction sites when we were 11 years old. There were no games. There were no laptops from hell. There was no finger painting and selling that to foreign nationals. We weren't doing any of that, right? None of the illicit pictures, and this is too pure of a room to get into what those pictures were, and I know you all know what they were. But he was an amazing father, and they got it right. They got it right. They instilled hard work into us. They instilled manners into us. We better have performed at whatever we chose to do. And so we always fought together. We fought together in real estate. We fought together on The Apprentice. And then all of a sudden here comes politics. And the number one rule of politics is generally keep your family the hell out of politics, right? And most of the time, kids are a detriment to their family, not an asset. But we didn't have anybody else. It was Don and I on that stage every single day, and my wife Laura and a few others. And we went out there and we fought and we burned through shoes. And then I saw what the ultimate siege was. And I've never gained more respect for a person. What they tried to do to him, the way they tried to kill him, the way they tried to kill us, the way they tried to bankrupt us, deplatform us, debank us, strip our voice, censor us, get rid of every First Amendment right, gag order us every single day. I was in the courtroom for every one of those indictments, every single one of these indictments, and I've overturned every single one of them. Well, certainly all the ones against the company. He's overturned every one against him. They tried to put us out of business. They tried to strip the Trump name off of every building around the world. They made up the Russia hoax, which you'll remember very well, which is, I hear you have secret servers, and I start getting calls from the FBI. I hear you have secret servers in the basement of Trump Tower communicating with the Kremlin. And I go, guys, we don't know what the Iowa caucuses are. Trust me, we can't, we're not nearly smart enough to communicate with the Kremlin. Give me a break, right? And then you had the dirty dossier that was meant to, destroy my father's marriage, destroy our family, right? I mean, the nastiness that Hillary paid for in that dossier. And then we had impeachment number 1, and then we had impeachment number 2, and then we had everything that they did to Kavanaugh, and then they took him off the ballot in Colorado, and then they took him off the ballot in Maine. They did everything they could. They leaked all of our tax returns to the IRS. All my father's tax returns were leaked from the IRS to the New York Times. Right? And then mine were all leaked, and 91 employees in our company, the IRS leaked those tax returns to the New York Times and to other papers. Guys, they did everything they could to again, silence us, imprison us, and then they tried to kill my father. They tried to kill him twice, and then you saw what they did to Charlie Kirk. And, this has been a battle that has been a siege. And it's been a siege for all of us. It was certainly a siege for this family. It was a siege for every person in this room, especially people living in California, where they've gone after your voice, and they've gone after your money, and they've gone after your businesses, and they've plagued you with DEI, and they've plagued your children with revisionist history, and they've come after Christianity. They've come after your freedom of faith in this country. They've come after certainly your First Amendment right, because as much as we were the ones being silenced, they were certainly they were turning down all the dials on all of you. They're coming after the Second Amendment. I have a good friend right there. If you ever come to an event like this and you don't tell me you're coming to the event, Bill Murphy, I'm going to be very mad. But they came after a Second Amendment, something that's very important to a good friend of mine that's sitting right there. And listen, they came after America. They put the MAGA movement, they put conservatives, they put us all under siege. And the good news is we won. And we won because I had a father that had the perseverance. And tenacity to not back down, to never give up, to not back down, to go out every single day and hit the media, and hit the media again, and hit the media again, and do what was right in this country. And sometimes it takes that loud voice, and sometimes it takes that firm voice, and sometimes it takes that politically incorrect voice. And that's why when I walked through this library this morning, and Chris and I were going through, the similarities in personality type are actually incredibly amazing. And I couldn't help but sit here and say, this is actually a great day for the Nixon Library, because so much of what you guys went through is proving to get overturned by society and kind of the will of the people and critical thinking. And so I'm incredibly proud of a man I love. No one else could have faced that journey. And I'm incredibly proud of this friendship that we've had for a very long time and being in a special place today. And the fact that as conservatives in this country, we're winning. We're winning. And here's how I know we're winning. We won the popular vote. We won every swing state. Every state in the country went to the right. We won Miami-Dade by 11 points, which hasn't been won in 37 years by a conservative. And in your great state of California, we picked up 11 counties that have never been won by a conservative before. And then I come to an event like this, and everybody's wearing MAGA hats. Guys, it's a beautiful thing. We're on the right side of these issues, and we're winning right now, and America should be very proud of all of that.
Well, thank God you did win. And thank you for your family for stepping into this life. You could have had such a wonderful life with your airplanes and Mar-a-Lago and your apartment in New York. And there's something that struck me about what you wrote. You talked about loyalty, and you said how there were people who were TV newscasters, businessmen, politicians. A lot of them in New York City are Democrats, by the way, but politicians who are very friendly with you, your best friends. And then the second that you aren't serving their interests, they drop you just like a hot potato. So maybe you could talk a little bit about loyalty, because I think that's what's engendered so much of the support among MAGA and for your family. There's a loyalty between the base and you, and it plays out. And then talk a little bit about how that's, you've seen some of your friends, how they've shown or haven't shown their loyalty.
Well, remember the people who were there in the bad times. Always remember the people who were there for you in the bad times, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of people in your life that won't be. And it's I know that's a dark message, but it's just the reality of the world. I'll give you one great example, all right? NBC, right? I mentioned The Apprentice before. NBC was dead. Celebrity Apprentice and The Apprentice kept them alive, right? CBS, they had Survivor, Mark Burnett, Survivor was doing unbelievable, it was winning every rating, and NBC was dying. And we did 14 seasons, and I'll never forget being in the office with my father. And NBC, all the executives, and Mark Burnett came in, he was also doing The Apprentice, and they go, we want to renew this season, or this show for 3 seasons. At least 3 seasons. It was going to be $1 billion, plus contract, and he goes, you know what, guys, I don't want to do it. I have something else on my mind. I'm thinking about doing something else. And they're begging him, and we'll up the amount of money. And he's like, no, I have something else on my mind. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But a couple of days later, he announced obviously that he was going to run for president. He came to the bottom of that escalator, and you got to remember, the NBC executives were our best friends. They were in Trump Tower all the time. They loved us. I mean, he was keeping them alive. He was keeping the network alive. He was, obviously had the best ratings every single week. It was the most profitable show by far. NBC was coming back. They were making this resurgence all because of Donald Trump. 3 days later, he gets to the bottom of the escalator. And honestly, it's like they had never even met him or us. They turned on us like that. I mean, it was so stark. And there were so many people. And that's why I go back to that meeting when he pulled us into the office that day. He goes, listen, we're going to find out who our real friends are. And we did. We did instantly. And what was amazing is, so many people wrote us off at that time, right? As I said, that's why we didn't have anybody else. So, my father called me one night. He was like, honey, I need you to go on Megyn Kelly to talk about immigration. I go, I know nothing about immigration. And he goes, but we don't have anybody else. Just go down there. You've always been pretty good in front of a camera and with a microphone. Just go down there, whatever, figure it out. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm on Megyn Kelly, and I'm in the center box. Megyn Kelly's next to me in a box, and it's just illegal immigrants all around me. And I'm pretending to fake through like I knew anything about immigrants. We had no one, right? We had no friends during this process, and so many people abandoned us. So many people. And then guess what? We won on November 8th of that year, and my phone went crazy. My phone went crazy. I've never gotten so many text messages in my life. Hey, buddy, how are you? I know how busy you've been, so I really want to be quiet, but we've been fighting for you on the sidelines. And I'm sitting there saying, lose my number. And then guess what? We became the most popular people in the room again for a 4-year period of time, and everybody loved us. And then sure enough, 2020. And I don't think there's probably anybody in here that actually believes that Joe Biden beat Barack Obama by 16 million votes. Does anybody believe that? And I'll never forget after that election how quiet the world became, right? And my father often talked about this, and he wrote 2 books, right? The Art of the Deal and The Art of the Comeback. And The Art of the Comeback, he talked about how there were days in his life that the phones just stopped ringing. And he was referring to the early 90s during kind of, the disastrous financial crisis in New York. And I never forgot that line, the days that the phone stopped ringing. And then sure enough, here you are in 2020. And we did everything right. And we had the enthusiasm. It was the biggest, you've never had a margin of vote that great for an incumbent president ever. We ended up getting 12 million more votes than we did in 2016. And instantly the phone stopped ringing. And there was a select group of people around us, and we knew again who were our friends. His father was one of the best of them, who never left the scene. He never, ever, ever once left the scene. And again, it was quiet for a period of time, and we were in those courtrooms every single day, dealing with indictments after indictment after indictment as they were weaponizing the system. And sure enough, the polls started ramping up, and November 5th comes back along, and we win. And guess what happens to the phones again? Guess how many text messages I got that day? A lot. But it's an amazing thing, that period of time, and I talk about this a lot in the book, but that period of time, I remember how just shattered we were. We thought we had won it. We had done everything right. We had put our heart and soul into it, and we're sitting there in the White House, in 2020, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and the polls totally go upside down at 1:30 in the morning. We have all those big dumps happen, and everything. We go from winning massively to losing. And I remember how crushing that was. And now I look back, it's kind of the law of unintended consequences. You look back today and you realize that might have been the greatest thing that's ever happened to this nation, right? God works in mysterious ways. God works in very, very mysterious ways, but we were crushed. And now you look at it, no disrespect, but you would have had a Mike Pence, you would have had a very different cabinet than you have today. We found out once again who our true friends were, who would be there in the worst times. And those are the people who make up this government now. And every single one of them, they're killers. And we have the House and we have the Senate. And obviously we have the executive branch, and we've got a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, and we have the popular vote, and we had all the swing states, and the mainstream media in this country is largely dead because no one likes them and no one trusts them. And you have independent voices every single day, whether it be the Joe Rogans of the world or the Patrick Bet-Davids, all these podcasts that get tens and tens of millions of views. And all of a sudden, we're winning. We're winning because we're right on all the issues, and the Democrats are floundering right now. They've got no leadership. They've got no message. They can't stand on anything. No, they're unrecognizable as they do these No Kings marches, and they're dressed in, well, literally dresses, right? I mean, men dressed in dresses and tutus. If you want to be taken seriously in life, dress up and be a serious person. And we're winning on every single front, but we'll never, ever forget the people who were there in the worst times. You have to remember them. I mean, we all lost friends. We all, but in a certain way, that's cathartic. And I would almost guarantee you that every person in here has as well. There's probably people that disappeared out of your life for no good reason. And there's probably people who came into your life for great reason. I'm not sure if these guys would have been in our life to the same extent had it not been for that roller coaster that we. And so in terms of loyalty, you learn loyalty really quickly, but you also learn to embrace the people who are there in the worst times and never forget who fled you. And I think that's actually a very cathartic process.
Talking of some of the worst times, potentially something that could have been terrible, July 14th, 2024. I remember where I was. I think everyone in this room remembers where they were on that day. I remember I was at your club at Bedminster. Just a few hundred miles away, there was that terrible incident. Tell us a little bit about that, how it was emotionally for you as a son, and then what it meant for the country.
It was a day of rage for me. A lot of people in this room, one specifically over there, knows I've done a lot of shooting in my life, a lot of long-range shooting, and a rifle shot at 130 yards with modern rifles and optics is like like Tiger Woods missing a 4-inch putt. I was sitting there, I had my kids on my lap, I had my 4-year-old daughter on my lap, my son on my lap, and you see this whole thing happen, and I can't tell you how infuriated it's. And I said it a couple weeks before, and I got absolutely shelled for doing it. I was on Sean Hannity, and I went through everything that's in this book, right? The indictments, the Russia gates, the dirty dossiers, the silencing, everything that they did, the debanking, everything they tried to do to our family. And I said to Sean, I wouldn't be surprised that they tried to hurt him. I wouldn't be surprised that they tried to inflict, because guys, they had tried everything and they'd failed at everything else. And there I am, watching this whole thing, kind of powerless as a son. That was not a good feeling, right? That was not a good feeling, and I was infuriated, and I knew every person up on that stage, literally every single person up on that stage, and loved every single person up on that stage, including the people that were around him. And I was just pissed off, right? In fact, I'm still pissed off. I'm pissed off that we knew nothing about the guy. Right, and I think a lot of this country is as well. We know more about a guy, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant that got thrown out of the United States for being a gang member than we do about, this kid. We've seen, one picture of him? He looks like he's 14 years old. It's like this little prepubescent picture of this one kid, and we got into the cell phones of every January 6th protester, but somehow they can't get into the cell phone of a guy that had multiple cell phones and figure out who he was and what he was up to. We know absolutely nothing about this guy, and I remain wholly unsatisfied because, again, not only is my father best friend in the world, and not only had we been through this fight, and not only that, I could predict it had happened, as I did on Sean Hannity, as much as I got killed for saying that. People kept on saying, oh, Eric Trump, he's an alarmist. I go, I'm not an alarmist. I understand who these people are. And then fast forward to Charlie Kirk. I mean, Charlie was a great friend. I've been on a stage like this with Charlie Kirk 100 times. He was a very good friend. I met him when he was 21 years old, where he came into the Trump organization to tell us about how he wanted to take over all the student bodies all around the country and change the hearts and minds of an entire generation. I'm sitting there saying, wow. I mean, first of all, this kid's impressive, but those are lofty aspirations. And then you see a buddy with blood coming out of their neck, right? It's exactly what they wanted, guys. And I hate to say that because I know it sounds harsh and it's not politically correct, and I could sugarcoat all of this. And I promised myself in this book I wouldn't sugarcoat any of it. But they wanted us off of that stage in any way, shape, or form, right? Hillary Clinton raised 5 times as much money as we did. We effectively self-funded our first campaign. And we were able to beat the greatest political dynasty probably of the last century, because she had everything rigged and she actually knew her way around Washington, D.C., because we were willing to go stand on the roof of every single tractor in every swing state, speak at every single church, at every home, at every gathering, and we did so relentlessly until we had no voice left, right? Whereas you had Joe Biden, who literally hung out in a basement. They wouldn't let him out. They wouldn't let him campaign, and they couldn't stand the fact that we owned the stage, and no matter how many billions of dollars they raised, their commercials couldn't get the real message out. They couldn't touch the heart and soul of people. And so that's why they wanted my father dead. That's why they wanted me off that stage. That's why they wanted to imprison us. That's why they wanted to bankrupt us. That's why they tried to embarrass my father. That's why they went after the Trump organization. And I was the Trump organization. I became the most subpoenaed person in American history for doing nothing wrong. 112 subpoenas, all coming from Elizabeth Warren. We call her Pocahontas in the Trump family, but all coming from, for doing nothing wrong. But what did they want to do? They want to waste our time. They want to waste our money. They wanted to find one comma that was out of place, which they were never able to do. They wanted to imprison us. They wanted us to either be dead or to be cast away, rotting, voiceless, and bankrupt. That's why they got rid of us on Twitter. That's why they got rid of us on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. Any way they could get rid of us. And then you see what happened to Charlie. And they thought that by trying to extinguish that life, they would take another one of those prominent voices off the stage. And what's really amazing in America is the whole thing backfired on them. It backfired. Charlie Kirk and his legacy will be so much larger today based on what they did. They made him into a martyr. They tried to make my father into a martyr, and I really believe that God was looking down and saved his life that day. I mean, there's almost no question about it. And so, I can't tell you how horrible of a day that was. At the same time, I remember when he called me about 45 minutes later from the hospital, and I pretty much said to him, I go, you just won the election, because this entire country will not stand for this. They will not stand for this stuff anymore. And exactly 48 hours after that moment, I walked into the RNC, and I was the delegate from the state of Florida. Guys, I left communism. I'm so sorry. I had to leave communism. You guys have done a great job fighting it off, but I left New York, and New York with this current mayor is going to really be communist, right? And I went down to Florida, but I was the delegate from the state of Florida that ended up making my father the Republican nominee for president of the United States. And exactly 48 hours after that, I was the guy that introduced him, right before he spoke and, appeared on the RNC stage for the very last time. And it's just amazing the ups and downs of life, right? I mean, 2 days before that, you thought he was dead. 48 hours later, he's walking into an arena, and you had 50,000 people with ear patches, and massive excitement. It's remarkable, but a moment I'll never forget.
So that's, you mentioned Charlie Kirk, and what he really did is he changed the tone and tenor of civic engagement. Maybe you can talk a little bit about civic engagement and how important it is for, as conservatives, that we do this and raise the next generation to admire things like the Constitution and our founding fathers and things like this.
I actually think civic engagement's almost the thing that my father's done the best, right? He made politics exciting for a group of people who weren't excited by politics, right? I mean, guys, I grew up in the George Bush. I hope I'm not offending anybody in here, but I was at Georgetown during the George Bush era, and no one gave a damn about politics. No one cared about politics. No one was excited. No one was inspired by politics. I mean, you had the Politico types, right? But it just wasn't the same. And now all of a sudden, you look at the last Charlie Kirk rally. Just take the seconds before that awful shot went off. You had kids, and they're wearing, American flag hats with eagles on them, and they're in these great T-shirts, and they're waving the American flag, and they're patriotic, and they love our nation, and they love faith, and they love God, and they love our Constitution, they love our flag, they love our way of life, they love the fact that we're #1 in the world at everything we do. We're the superpower of the world. We're the greatest nation in the history of humanity by far. And they're out there, and these are college kids on a random day, and they could be doing anything else. They could be drinking, they could be chasing girls or guys or whatever it is. And guess what? They're listening to Charlie Kirk debate. And I mean, what a difference than my childhood, than my time in college. And if there's one thing that Donald Trump has done, and if there's one thing that Charlie Kirk did, he made politics exciting. I can't tell you. I go trick-or-treating in Florida with my kids. I would say half the kids that are trick-or-treating are wearing a suit and a red tie. I'm like, wait a second. You're not allowed to use that outfit. Like, you're like plagiarizing. Like my kids can't wear that. But isn't that exciting? Like, isn't it, when you look at the fact, when Erica Kirk spoke at Turning Point, right? They had 37,000 new chapters that had signed up to apply to Turning Point for various high schools, colleges, community colleges, et cetera, across the country. That's well over 100,000 today. The youth of this country is energized, they're engaged, and they've switched. They've switched in this country. And by the way, Chuck Schumer was complaining about this the other day. Chuck Schumer and AOC were literally yelling about this on Caitlin Collins' show. In fact, I was on right after it on CNN. They've taken, the youth male vote of the United States, and so many females are following. I'm like, yeah, because the youth male vote of this country didn't want to see guys my size swimming against women in collegiate women's sports. They weren't okay with this. And they weren't okay with the revisionist history, and they weren't okay with failing their college classes because they happened to have a different point of view on humanity than their teacher, who had never done it, but by the way, who had always taught, never actually practiced. And all of a sudden, they started lashing out, and it became popular to lash out, and it became popular to become a conservative, and it became the cool thing. And then all of a sudden, when Charlie got killed, I think what they did was they cemented 5 generations, 5 decades of voting at least into those kids. I mean, think about it. If there's one group you don't want to lose, it's youth, because they're going to be able to vote in every election for the next 20 cycles. And who do you think those people are voting for after everything that's transpired? Do you think they're ever going back to the Democratic Party? Not a chance. Not a chance. And that's why the entire map of the United States is the last election. You know, yesterday during No King's Day, the biggest meme that was going around was really like an amazing thing. It was a map of the US, and it was just the whole thing was red. And the little meme caption was, "Our No King's Day was last November 5th," right? And then they showed the map. But civics is incredibly important, and we cannot allow for revisionist history. We cannot allow them to rewrite our textbooks. We must fight like hell. And that's why it's really important that, and I don't mean to be long-winded about this, but this is why it's really important that we actually focus on some of the local races. Republicans have been horrible with this, right? I think it's because so many Republicans come out being entrepreneurs. You know, we always want to be president. We want to be in Senate. We want to be in Congress. But outside of that, it's like, you know, let somebody else handle it. And honestly, the Democratic Party had steamrolled us for years because they filled up every single church, every school board, every little community board, every zoning board, you know, every election board. And we never focused on those seats. And we better start focusing on those seats, otherwise we're not going to have a country, and they're going to continue to harm and hurt our children, as they have so badly in this state.
Well, I think the audience is sick and tired of me asking questions, so now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience for Eric. So I think we have the first question.
Gentleman off to your right-hand side.
On the right, here we go.
You're right over here. Our first question. What is your question?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and your family and deep down for the tenacity and helping save this country. What can you do, or what will be done for the media and all this, you know, the slamming and everything they're doing? Is there any repercussions that we can look forward to? Because I don't know how you guys are making it through all this.
Well, we've sued the hell out of all the media. So, and by the way, we've done really well. I don't know who's in the background. I don't know those cameras in the background, but we went after 60 Minutes viciously. You know what they did, right? I mean, 60 Minutes took that interview of Kamala, and they asked her a question about Israel, and it was totally incoherent, right? Everything she said was incoherent. Nothing made sense. She couldn't pick up a microphone and be even remotely coherent. And so they spliced all these different versions together, and all of a sudden they made it into a version that was slightly coherent. It still wasn't great, but it was fine. It was passable. And then all of a sudden they promoted her clip, and they used the actual interview by mistake. And then sure enough, the actual 60 Minutes ran, and it was this beautifully well-polished, edited version. And somebody raised the flag, say, hold on 1 second, it's the same question with 2 different answers, what happened? And we ended up suing 60 Minutes, and they wrote a check for, I think it was $20 million or $18 million to the Donald J. Trump Presidential Library. Not that I'll ever plug that again. Which I'm designing right now. It's gonna be located in Miami, Florida, so it's gonna be right on the water in Miami, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. And I'm getting a lot of wisdom for this guy, but then he sued Facebook, and he did very, very well there. And guys, we have to hold these people accountable. It's not like we enjoy doing this, but we have to hold these people accountable. I mean, think about, just for a second, old Twitter before Elon bought it. Right? They threw my father off there. They turned all our dials down. I mean, I didn't gain a single follower for like a 5-6 year period of time, which didn't really make sense given how vocal and public we were. They took my father off, but they left Boko Haram, they left the Ayatollah, they left, you know, the Taliban, they left Al-Qaeda accounts. Every terrorist organization in the world was on Twitter, but yet they threw my father off, right? They did the same thing with YouTube. And that's actually why we created Truth Social, because we needed a way to communicate. We needed a way that we couldn't be censored and we couldn't be shut off, and that's why Truth Social went like this. And then thank God Elon came in and bought Twitter. As expensive as it was at the time, it's probably the best investment a guy ever made, because he restored free speech in this country. And then people got so pissed off at traditional mainstream media that they started tuning them out. Right? My wife, I said this to a different room before, but my wife on a Saturday night, My View at Laura Trump, has about 2.5 million people watching on the average Saturday night. This is 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. That's considered Death Valley in TV ratings. And they try and get the best people there because they actually want to try and maintain, right? So that's like the biggest hurdle, and sometimes they try and put the best people there to overcome the fact that it's a Saturday night. And yet Caitlin Collins on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the 9 o'clock slot on CNN is getting about 400,000, right? So Laura Trump is getting roughly 6 times what CNN is. And the point of the story is traditional media is dead. Podcasts, independent voice is roaring. If you think about Joe Rogan's studio, you could probably build it for about $12, right? It's a simple room, a couple cameras, microphone, very simple. Walk into AOL Time Warner, which is where CNN broadcasts out of New York, right? Or walk into their Atlanta headquarters. They've got hundreds of people running around with cups of coffee, doing absolutely nothing, right? You know, a corporate media telling them what to say, trying to literally change the hearts and minds of farmers in this country, yet they've never met a farmer in this country. They've never been to the very states that they're broadcasting to. And they totally lost touch with the message and the communication of an entire nation. And so mainstream media is dead. Unconventional media, including the podcast world, is taking over everything. And because of that, people have become really good. Like they're all of a sudden finding the niches of what they like. You know, if you're a Christian, all of a sudden you're tuning into these great kind of Christian programs. If you're a little bit of an independent, but you want critical thinking, maybe you're tuning in your, you've got testosterone. Maybe you're turning into Joe Rogan, but all of a sudden you've got all these little unique, non-scripted, non-corporate controlled voices that are entering your ear for the first time. The media has lost control. And that's a beautiful thing for this nation. It's a beautiful thing for freedom of speech and our First Amendment rights. And so how we held them accountable was making them irrelevant. And doing what they did and losing their credibility is ultimately what's going to cost them all their jobs.
Gentlemen, our next question off to your left, second row back.
Good morning. Humor is the best medicine, and the humor that's coming out of the Oval Office is awesome. Thank you. So my question is, when you were under pressure and under siege, how did humor frame the crazy?
Oh, God. Honestly, if you don't laugh, you're going to die. I mean, I think everybody who knows me well knows that I can be incredibly sarcastic in a good way and like a funny way. I mean, you probably hear a little bit of my personality doing what I'm doing right now. My father's always been the same way. In fact, he had me laughing so badly last week. So he runs over to Israel. Everybody saw him, right? And he's in their parliament and he's speaking, and he gets Middle East peace. And he looks down at Bibi Netanyahu. He goes, you know, somebody who's here that's really, really special is my daughter, and she loves Israel. You know, Bibi, she converted to Judaism. Now, Bibi, this was not exactly in the cards. You must understand, like, you know, my daughter converting over to Judaism was not exactly, and the entire parliament was just laughing, right? It was so real. It was so funny, right? Everybody's in there, and obviously. And he just achieved Middle East peace and brought religions together. And he's literally joking about how the conversion of his daughter, and no one, do you think Barack Obama would have done that? I mean, did you ever see the Barack Obama when they got bin Laden versus the Donald Trump when they got al-Baghdadi? And, you know, we conducted a very orchestrated raid and, you know, we killed Osama bin Laden. My father's like, yeah, we got the guy like a dog, you know, we had our Belgian Malinois, and they were chewing on his throat. Like, you would think he would go through the front door, but instead we just blew a big hole in the big wall, and he cried like a little baby. And isn't that why people like him? I mean, hey guys, you know where I saw this for the first time? I saw this during the 2016 primaries. And you'd have, and I'm going to bash Republicans for a second, but you'd have so many Republicans, they go up there, and you know they had rehearsed these little, you know somebody else had written it for them. They probably like hired like a comedian. And then they had rehearsed some soundbite in the mirror over and over. And when they delivered it, it just wasn't authentic. You know, do you remember when Hillary did the whole, you know, I'm so glad that Donald Trump doesn't, you know, run the laws of this country, right? And he'd snap back, because you'd be in jail, right? And he did so off the cuff. And it was always that wit, you know, Megyn Kelly, and you know, she's now a friend of ours again, right? It was kind of, you know, she was a friend of ours, and she kind of exited the scene for a little while, and now she's a I was just on her podcast 2 days ago, but it was the same thing with like the Rosie O'Donnell question. Like she wanted to take him off of that stage. She tried, like that was her sniper move to try and knock my father out. You've called people X, Y, and Z, and he goes, only Rosie O'Donnell. And every time that there was a moment like that in politics, right? Like lovability jumped up. Right? I mean, you sense that you were dealing with a real person, a real soul. It wasn't some scripted bureaucrat. It was just a real person who you would probably enjoy having at your kitchen table that makes you laugh. And so I think actually humor got us here. And I actually think humor's keeping us here because the Democrats can't meme. It's really like an amazing thing. Like we are, they cannot meme. We have all the good memes. Now they give us plenty of content, if that makes sense. They give us all the great content. But you see some of the memes that go around and they're just so perfect. Right? They're so perfect, and there were so many yesterday during this No King's Day, march, and I honestly think so many of them are sharp and they're witty, and they get people quickly thinking, and it kind of provides critical thinking. So I do think humor is a big part of this journey. I think it's a big part of likability, but I think it's also a big part of a relatability. And at the end of the day, relatability is kind of everything in politics.
All right here in the center section. But I do want to do one thing. All of you have a copy of the book in your hands, and we're going to get into a signing with all of these books. So we're going to take one last question. But before we do that, can everyone hold up their book and look at the photographer on the right side of the room? This will make for a cool picture for the Nixon Foundation's newsletter. All right, our final question.
You are very articulate. You have a beautiful family. You're very loyal. Have you thought of running for president of the United States?
Oh, don't give me nightmares.
Trump 28.
Honestly, since I wrote this, and honestly, I just want to materialize this story. Like I really mean that. I want to materialize it. I wasn't trying to win awards. It's sold out on Amazon several times. They can't, literally 7-8 weeks of books done by Simon Schuster sold out in 5 days. It's been #1 nonstop for, and it's gonna drive, by the way, the New York Times absolutely crazy when they have to give me the #1 New York Times. We've sold hundreds of thousands of books in a 5-day period of time. It's probably gonna be the biggest release of this year, and it's, and by the way, ever since that, I've started getting that question, right? Do you want to run for politics? Guys, it is such a horribly awful job. I mean it. I've been joking a lot with people lately that like you almost have to have these like masochistic tendencies. Like you have to enjoy pain a little bit in order to, because honestly, the system has been so evil, and I really hope that's what we root out, right? Everybody's, oh, Donald Trump is going to get revenge against his political enemies. No, it's not revenge. It's honestly accountability for the scum that is in Washington, D.C. that has destroyed so many people's lives for doing absolutely nothing wrong, because they believe in faith, because they believe in God, because they don't want their children indoctrinated and touched, because they believe in a constitution, because they don't want to see history destroyed and changed, by these crazies, because they don't want to see DEI, because they were passed up in their workplace for a promotion that they never got because a less qualified person who made some kind of quota ended up taking their job, taking their career. People don't want to be silenced anymore. And because of all of that, they were able to take a government and weaponize it, weaponize the DOJ, weaponize the FBI, spy on our campaign. Was anybody impeached because they spied on our, they really did, right? The FBI and the DOJ, they spied on the 2016 campaign, right? They orchestrated, it's a good friend of mine, Jim, who ran this library for a long time. Many of you probably know him, right? They said he now runs NARA. They said that the reason Mar-a-Lago got raided was on behalf of the National Archives. Everybody knows that was BS. Do you think a glorified public library in Washington, D.C. has the power to raid Mar-a-Lago? Of course not. That came from Biden. That came from Merrick Garland. Obama. Certainly came from Obama because he was running the whole thing. with a little help from the auto pen, by the way, like in a... By the way, I don't mean to digress because I'm totally going off subject, but I'm having fun up here. I mean, have you seen the new portraits? You know, all the great presidents, it's Nixon, it's Reagan, it's Bush, it's Clinton, it's Bush. You know, that's Obama. And then you get to, you know, my father, and then it's the auto pen, and then it's my father again. And by the way, the coolest part of this entire thing is that the whole colonnade, right, is straight. And then it gets to the very end, and there's like 2 or 3 steps that go up, right? So you go Obama, and then you go Trump, but it just goes up like 3 inches. It's just like a little subtle power play that you would only understand if you understood Donald Trump, right? So like Obama's here, and then it goes Trump, and then it goes auto pen straight across, and then it goes Trump, right? Because the auto pen's on like the little landing, right? And so it's only Donald Trump could do this, right? I mean, but guys, it's been a hell of a run. It's been a hell of a journey, and our country's in great hands. I mean, our country's in great hands. I can tell you, this family needed this whole ordeal like a hole in the head. Trust me, our family would have been better not writing this book. You know, doing real estate jobs all over the world. There's no one better at it than us. I can't tell you how much money we spent throughout this horror. I mean, just the legal fees that I incurred at Trump.org was about $400 million to keep nonsense off of us. Meaning these are like made up stories. Like everybody knew we didn't have secret servers in the basement of Trump Tower, right? Everybody knew that the dirty dossier was just a dirty dossier, but yet we had Adam Schiff every day coming out and saying, you know, Donald Trump Jr. is going to go to jail for treason. And Don's like, I don't know anybody in Russia. Could somebody like, you know, and so our lives would have been a hell of a lot better not being in the fight. At the same time, when you see Middle East peace, when you see peace between, you know, India and Pakistan, that was gonna, you know, when you see peace between Thailand and Cambodia, these are wars that were actively stopped. When you see gas prices coming down, when you see inflation coming down, when you see the greatest economy now that we've ever had, when you see respect around the world for the United States of America again, and we had no respect. Everybody was laughing at us. It makes it all worth it. You know, again, we've saved Christianity, we've saved the Constitution, we've saved freedom of speech, you know, we've saved the family unit. We sure as hell better save education. And back to your civics question, we better save education in this country. But America's doing great, and we're the most revered and respected country again. And I could not be more proud. And honestly, it makes everything in here, it makes it all worth it. So, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Eric.
Chris, thank you, my friend.
Eric, Christopher, thank you very much. The book is under siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. He's going to sign it in our lobby right now. We'll see you up there. Thank you for coming. God bless all of you, and God bless America.